Question starts us off with the function f of x equals cosine x, and then they want the 53rd derivative. There's the answer. How do we know that? Well, first off, let's start with the basic derivative idea. The derivative of sine is cosine, and the derivative of cosine is negative sine. So there's the basic derivative rules. Anytime you take the derivative of a cofunction, it switches the sign. That's what a negative in front means, switches the sign. So here we go. So if I take a derivative here, what's the derivative of cosine? It's going to be negative sine. I don't need the x. I'm just going to skip the x. Let's take another derivative. Okay, what's it going to do? Well, that was a derivative. So now the derivative of sine, that minus in the front will just sit there, right? And what's the derivative of sine? The sine part is cosine. Is that making sense? Any sign that's in the front is like a number. It's a negative one, really, multiplying the front of the trig function. Numbers multiplying the front of any function of x, when we do a derivative, just sit there as a spectator. Then you do the derivative of the other part, where sine is cosine. Okay. Now let's do a third derivative. And again, the minus is just going to sit there. It's a spectator. And then what is the derivative of cosine? Derivative of any cofunction is negative. So it's negative. No, I'm skipping the x's. So that actually equals positive, doesn't it? Do you see why that came back to positive? Because whenever you do the derivative of a cofunction, it's negative. So if there's already a negative in the front, two negatives make positive. Ah, let's keep going. So I'm going to go fourth derivative. That it looks like a power, but we understand it's a derivative. Okay. So the derivative, we always take the last function into derivative sign, we're back to cosine. And then what's the next one going to be? What's the fifth derivative? Derivative of cosine, negative sine. Ah, okay. And what's the sixth derivative going to be? Well, the negative will sit in the front. And what's the derivative of sine? Derivative of sine is cosine. Okay. And then what's the seventh derivative? Well, again, the minus will sit in the front. And then we have derivative cosine is negative sine. So we get the double negative. It's positive sine. Ah, do you see this rotation that's happening? Right? Um, we've got this pattern. Cosine, wait, let me do a different color. Cosine, negative sine, negative cosine, sine. See that four-fold pattern? Cosine, negative sine, negative cosine, sine. And then what do we have here? Cosine, negative cosine, sine. Same pattern, right? Cosine, negative sine, negative cosine, sine. So it just keeps rotating through that cycle of four different things. Because anytime you take the derivative of a cofunction, it changes its sign. So it becomes negative, and then the negative co becomes positive, right? And so it just keeps going through that cycle. Okay, so what's it going to do on the 53rd derivative? Very good question. Um, hmm. Yeah, the way I wrote up the pattern is true, but I realize that's not the most helpful. Let me back up my thinking. It's right, but I see now you're going to see it more easily another way. Let's skip that first. I should not have included this guy because he's not a derivative. So just skipping him, let's just do the others. And let's do one more down here. What do we got? Yeah, let's do a f to the 8. One more. Derivative of sine, that'll be easy. Cosine. Okay. Now let's look at the pattern again, starting with this derivative. So right here, boom, boom. So it goes all the way to there. So it's what? Negative sign for the first derivative, negative cosine, positive sine, positive because that's the first derivative, second derivative, third derivative, fourth derivative, right? And then same repeating pattern, right? It's again, it's if you notice, it's negative sine right here, negative cosine, positive sine, positive cosine for the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth derivative, etc. We'll just say etc. So it's going to keep doing that cycle, but starting with the first derivative, second, third, fourth, and then again, again, again. So how about you're trying to get all the way out to the 53rd derivative? Well, basically, you're going to keep repeating this cycle of four. How many times? So how many cycles of four in 53? Because that's what we're asking, right? We're gonna go out to the 53rd derivative, and we know it's just gonna go one, two, three, four. One, two, three, four. It's just gonna keep doing that. So how many full cycles of four? Well, you can just long divide. So four goes into 53 how many times? Well, let's do a little long division here. Maybe it's been a while since you've done this. Four goes into 13 three times. That's 12. And that's your remainder. So that means, what does that mean? That means that there's 13 cycles of four, full cycles of four, remainder one more, right? So that means four goes into 53 13 times with one remaining. So that means on our way out to the 53rd derivative, we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 13 full cycles. And then in the last cycle, we'll go one more into the last cycle. That making sense? So what is the cycle? Here's the cycle. Minus sine, minus sine, minus cosine, plus cosine. Minus sine, minus cosine, plus sine, plus cosine. And then minus sine, you just keep repeating that. 13 full cycles, and then we'll go one more into the last cycle. One more into the last cycle. What does that mean? If you go one more into the last cycle, one more, what's the first one in the cycle? Minus sine, right? The top one more into the new cycle is minus sine, which is what we got, minus sine. That's how we know it's going to start one more cycle. What if they had said, let's change it up. What if they had said 54 derivatives? Well, I would have said, 13 into 54, well, not 13. What am I doing? I'm getting confused. 4 into 54. How many full cycles of 4? That's 14. That's 12. Remainder 2. That would mean 2 into the last cycle. So it would have gone 1, 2. It would have been minus cosine. That makes sense? You just got to find, it's just going to keep repeating that cycle of four. You just got to find out how many full cycles there are and specifically what's the remainder. How far do we go into the last cycle? Because otherwise, we're just going to repeat minus sine, minus cosine, plus cosine, minus sine, minus cosine, plus cosine. And then that's full cycles. And then what's your remainder? Right? For whatever they want, however many derivatives they want, what's your remainder? How far do you go into the last cycle? And that tells you whether you're in the first spot, second spot, third spot, or fourth spot in the last cycle, which will tell you what your derivative is. And there we go.